travelers, there is no path. Paths are made by walking. Corporations are not countries. They think differently, they change more quickly, but they imitate nations. Corporations have their own culture, a special kind of language. They have leadership, policies, internal and external financial arrangements. They have day-to-day needs and long-term objectives. They are the sum of knowledge and opportunity, not history. Countries are the sum of history, turbulence, chaos, war and peace. A nation's culture is a form of institutional memory, a type of knowledge. But nations only occasionally seek opportunity. Mostly, they seek to remain the same, to maintain the status quo.
If you look at the economic literature and the evidence, we see that the best countries are small countries, from 3-4 million to 8-10 million people, because it gives you a more cohesion population.
Cataluña es una nación real, tiene su historia de más de 1000 años, tiene su lengua de más de 1000 años, tiene su cultura de más de 1000 años, que no hemos tenido Estado desde hace 300 años, pero que tuvimos Estado durante 700 años.
Catalonia's informal vote on independence demonstrated that more than 80% could be in favour of separation. The non-binding vote avoided direct conflict with Spain's constitutional court, which had ruled against holding a formal referendum in Spain's autonomous northeastern region.
This was not a referendum, it wasn't a consultation, it was a participatory process, simply because the Spanish constitutional courts had forbidden each of the earlier stages, and yet it still went ahead. I was an observer, part of a parliamentary delegation. We went to polling station after polling station to try and observe what was going on. There was a lot of enthusiasm to take part, and a lot of people did take part, and it was certainly an interesting result. But the challenge is, this is process discussion right now, this is not policy discussion. And so a turnout to 37.5% is impressive, but the whole problem is, if you keep putting barriers in the way of people making these choices, you're going to make it more difficult to get a real, true result out of it.
The Spanish government was furious. Spanish Justice Minister Rafael Catala called the vote a sterile and useless sham, a day of political propaganda organised by pro-independence forces and devoid of any kind of democratic validity. Days after the poll, the Spanish Prime Minister said the vote was a failure, with only 1/3 of the eligible electorate participating. Spanish opposition socialist leader Pedro Sánchez had a more positive message. He said Catalonia was at the vanguard of change that would lead to a federal Spain.
Maybe Catalan exit will be an opportunity for Spain to real reform the status quo.
Actually, there are two ways to conceive a state like Spain. One way is to conceive Spain as a unitary state. The other one is to consider Spain as a nation of nations.
Madrid doesn't consider Spain as a family of nations. This is their concept of what a Spanish state is, very different from the way Cameron is handling the situation in the UK. He has repeatedly said that the UK is a family of 4 nations, and he recognizes them. He gave the Scots their say. In Madrid, that is out of the question.
In Scotland, in the UK, very early on, London and Edinburgh reached an agreement. There would be a referendum, the question was agreed, the timing was agreed, the franchise was agreed, and indeed the binding aspect, both would abide by the result, and it was put into law. So the next 2 years thereafter was policy discussion, everything, the economy, energy, environment, every aspect discussed, out of which emerged an answer. 55% said let's stay in the UK, 45% said let's go. In Catalonia, they're still discussing the question stage.
Unfortunately, we don't have David Cameron, or we don't have a government who is trying to resolve the conflict in terms of in a peaceful and democratic way. Madrid is acting now in terms of more or less in terms of revenge.
And I agree with Cameron. I was in Scotland in the referendum, and he said the day after, today the union is stronger than yesterday because Scottish people has voted in favour. And for one generation, I saved Great Britain. And he did it. But now you discover that Catalonia belongs to Spain not because of the will of the Catalans, because of history of wars and dictatorships that keep us as a colony.
Spanish King Philip II ruled a vast dominion, conquering, oppressing newly discovered peoples and plundering their lands. But almost as soon as his star ascended, it was burning out, and this formidable CEO's corporate strategy was being tested by inflation, rebellion and corruption. Read about 17th, 18th, 19th century Spain, and you might think that the royal family business really needed a new business plan. It didn't get any better in the 20th century. Bloody repression of the Catalans in 1909, a collapsing monarchy, economic chaos, and the rise of military dictators, Franco being the best known brand.
Rajoy is situated in this position of unitarian Spain, the French model. And this has been used by him and his party to obtain votes. But now he is in a position in which he has very few room for maneuver to negotiate.
It's clear for me that Spain has a problem. The way they've been handling the Catalan case as well as the Basque case in the past, if they don't change direction, they could end up with one of their most prosperous regions to leave the state. In my opinion, they should try to accommodate them, be it in a federation or a confederation even. I see the solution for Flanders in that sense.
Though the current mood seems unmistakably in favour of separation, the real picture is more complicated, and Catalonia is just one of several aspiring states within the European Union.
I'm an Irish Republican. I want to see the peaceful and democratic reunification of my country, but I say that in the context of also being an Irish Republican who has forged agreements with the British government, the Irish government and unionist political leaders, and we've actually all agreed in the Good Friday negotiations that, for example, if the people of the North, and I believe they should be given the right to have a border poll, if they decide to leave what is described as the United Kingdom, then the British government, through the international treaty that is the Good Friday Agreement, is duty bound to legislate to bring about a united Ireland. So that's the vote that I would like to see in Ireland.
The issue for Europe and separatist regions is democracy, a right to choose, a right to self-determination.
Now that we have the globalization and Europe has to compete and to do things better, it is a question of centralized big countries coming from the 19th century, like Great Britain, like France, like Italy, like Spain, which they have only one tax agency centralized in the capital, and the infrastructures are managed in a centralistic model. It is not the problem of Germany. Germany is a big country, but there are 17 regions with full tax collection powers and full capacity to decide on infrastructure. So de facto, Germany is ruling as 17 small, efficient Denmarks.
One of the world's most successful family businesses is IKEA. It has a pre-packed format for modern nation builders. You just need a few simple tools, a diagram, and somebody who will actually follow the instructions properly. IKEA doesn't think in terms of 19th century nation states. It doesn't do borders. It has a brighter idea. IKEA looks for mega regions, big urbanized areas where industrial and commercial activity form hubs without much consideration for political frontiers. Using satellite images, global corporations look for light density, identifying locations for logistics depots and new stores. It's a practical strategy, and it gets to the point of how modern Europe should reorganize its regions, with less emphasis on centralized 19th century command and control, and more emphasis on regional autonomy, including tax powers.
Belgium has become a transfer union, where the central government collects the money, gives power to the regions, and then redistributes part of the money to the regions to exercise these powers. Now, this is something you shouldn't do. That is making politicians responsible to exercise powers, but not giving them the responsibility to raise the money to pay for those powers. That leads to a lack of accountability.
Our system is completely unfair in the sense that we have a fiscal deficit of 8.6%. That means 60 billion per year. If you compare, the region of London have, I think, 4.7% of fiscal deficit. The contribution of the region to the other regions.
We have a two-speeds Europe, the Nordic one and Germany behaving as different small parties, and the southern, bigger, centralized countries. So what In Flanders, there is a push also for competitiveness. In Catalonia, the north of Italy, Scotland, there are historical nations that are saying our current statu quo have costs.
The risk for Europe, the danger for Europe, is Nigel Farage. Is state nationalism, not people nationalism, not Scotland nor Catalan. The risk for Europe is Marine Le Pen. The risk for Europe is extreme right in Germany, in Italy, and everywhere. And this is another kind of nationalism. Our is pro-European, absolutely.
Spanish surrealist Salvador Dali said, "We must always remember that the Chinese Revolution was not a peasants' revolution, but one of the extreme right." So often, this is the case. Nationalist wolves dressed as aspirational lambs. It can be as true of the secessionist leadership in Barcelona and Venice as it is of unitary leadership in Madrid and Rome. Should the Flemish destroy Belgium to build a new Flemish state? Is democracy really the issue, or is it just the money?
I cannot speak Catalan in this parliament. Because of the Spanish veto, I cannot speak Catalan. This is why I always speak in English here, as a protest against this discrimination. And we are living in the 21st century. It is not only a question of economic, which is also it is. For the Spanish-speaking people, it's an economic issue. But for Catalan people, with Catalan as mother tongue, that our language have been always considered as a second level language, for me it's much more important identity and fundamental rights than a question of money.
The art of conflict resolution is the ability of people to get into dialogue and negotiation with each other to find a way forward. And I think that huge steps for peace have been made by Basque representatives and by ETA in the Basque country. And I think that should be reciprocated by the Spanish government.
I think that the Basque country, the situation of the Basque country and trying to resolve the conflict in the Basque country is also a European affair. And the European Union has to play a role in this sense.
There needs to be a dialogue between Barcelona and Madrid to work out how to go forward for the good of Catalonia and for the good of Spain. A serious debate may well have a different result, but the debate has to be based on common agreement and serious arguments on both sides. And until that happens, there will be no progress in Catalonia.
Nationalists speak about history as though it was the Supreme Court. History, they say, sets the precedent and the natural order of things must be restored or maintained. But history is a mess. In a country such as Spain, nobody owns history. In fact, if you really want to talk about rights based in history, Spain should belong to France or Britain. It was the Habsburgs, the Bourbons, then Napoleon invaded Spain in 1908 and deposed Ferdinand VII, who had been on the throne for 48 days. Joseph Bonaparte, Napoleon's eldest brother, entered Madrid and established a government. Joseph became King of Spain, serving as a surrogate for Napoleon. Then the Battle of Vittoria in 1813, when an Allied army under the Duke of Wellington decisively defeated the French, and in 1814 Ferdinand VII was restored as King of Spain. In Wellington's London townhouse, a short walk from Harrods, Joseph Bonaparte's coffee casket is on display. It was confiscated from this one-time King of Spain. Maybe David Cameron can bring it back to Spain, serving coffee to Rajoy and Mas in IKEA cups.